The hiss of the steam engine rolled across the empty Wyoming plateau like a tired sigh. Mary Whitlow felt the same exhaustion deep in her bones. She sat stiffly in her seat, fingers tight around the worn little bag in her lap. Outside the window, the land was gray, cold, and cruel. Thin spring snow blew sideways across the rails, too cold to melt and too weak to become a storm. Willow Bluff appeared ahead like a broken promise, a scatter of rough wooden buildings beside the tracks, a place that looked like the end of the world. This was where her lie ended, or where her new life might begin. The train stopped with a jolt. Men climbed down first, ranch hands in dusty denim, prospectors with wild hopes in their eyes, a few stern-faced men in dark coats who watched everything. Then came the women. Very few of them. Every gaze followed Mary as she stepped onto the splintered platform. She pulled her thin shawl tight around her shoulders, trying to hide the shaking in her hands. She wasn't looking for a husband. She wasn't looking for anyone. She only wanted her aunt's small sewing shop, a place where she could work and disappear. But in her bag was the reason for all her fear, a ticket with the wrong name, Eliza. A name she had whispered to the conductor with a trembling voice, a name she had no right to use. And the moment she stepped onto that platform, everything went wrong. "That's her!" the drunken voice yelled. Mary froze. A man stumbled toward her, red-faced, filthy, half-drunk before noon. "That's my Eliza!" he shouted. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She took a step back, but the man kept coming. Before he reached her, a tall figure moved through the crowd like a knife cutting through cloth. A hand, firm, steady, strong, clamped down on the drunk's shoulder. "Jed," the man said, voice low as thunder, "leave the lady be." Jed grumbled, but the stranger's grip was iron. The drunk backed off, stumbling toward the freight wagon. Then the tall man turned to Mary. He wore a wide hat that shadowed his gray eyes, but she could still see the sharpness in them. This was a man used to being obeyed, a man carved from wind and hard work and years under the open sky. "Are you Eliza?" he asked. Mary swallowed hard. Her throat burned. She wanted to speak, but the name stuck like a stone. She gave a small, helpless nod. He studied her, not with hunger like the other men, but with a calm, unreadable judgment. "You can wait at the general store. Mrs. Gable at the boarding house will find you a room," he said. Then he turned and walked away, not sparing another glance. He didn't know that with a single question he had stepped straight into her lie. Mary moved through the crowd like a frightened rabbit. She hurried to the place her aunt's shop was supposed to be. But when she arrived, she felt the ground fall out beneath her. The windows were boarded. The sign hung crooked. A faded notice said sold for back taxes. Her aunt was gone. All her hope vanished in a single heartbeat. She stood there in the cold wind, alone in a place already whispering lies about her. She found the boarding house next. The owner, Mrs. Gable, looked at her the way a butcher looks at a piece of meat he didn't order. "Room?" the woman asked. "For Jed's bride?" Mary's stomach twisted. "Just for a few nights," she whispered. The price was twice what it should have been, but Mary had no choice. She paid for one night, almost all the money she had left, and sat on the stiff bed, her hands trembling in her lap. But trouble found her fast. A heavy knock echoed at her door. Mary opened it to find a thick-set man with a silver star pinned to his vest. His eyes were small and sharp. "Mary Whitlow?" he asked, though he said it like he already knew. "Yes," she answered quietly. "That's strange," he said, holding up a passenger list. "Your ticket," says Eliza. "It was bought for me by a friend," she lied softly. The sheriff's smile was slow and oily. "We don't like trouble in Willow Bluff," he said. "And trouble often comes wearing a different name." When he left, Mary sank onto the bed, her breath shaking. She had escaped one town of rumors, only to land right in the middle of another. By morning, she had one goal left: survival. She walked to the general store, the only place busy enough to offer work, and inside, arguing with the shopkeeper over the price of flour. stood the tall, gray-eyed cowboy from the platform, Caleb Hart. He nearly ran into her when he turned. "You're still here," he said. He didn't sound surprised, just resigned, like he had expected problems. Mary swallowed her pride. "I need work," she said. "I heard you need a camp cook." He stared at her thin dress, her trembling hands, the stubborn lift of her chin. He saw fear, but he also saw something else, something he hadn't expected. "I need a cook," he said, "but it's no work for a woman." "I'm a hard worker," she whispered. "Please." A long silence stretched between them. Then he nodded once. "Wagon leaves in 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes felt like the longest and shortest of her life. Soon she was sitting beside him on the rattling buckboard as they left Willow Bluff behind. The wind whipped through her hair. The land stretched wide and empty around them, and Mary felt the thin thread of her life tightening around a man she barely knew. When they reached the cattle camp, he introduced her simply. "This is Mary," he told the cowboys. He didn't call her Eliza. He didn't repeat Jed's claim. He just said her name, the real one, as if he'd somehow known all along. "She'll be cooking for us." Mary stepped down into the dust, staring at the rough camp that would decide whether she lived or starved. Her new life had begun, but she had no idea how dangerous, how heartbreaking, and how beautiful it was about to become. How long can a woman outrun a lie when the truth is chasing her with sharper teeth? Life at the camp hit Mary fast and hard. Before dawn each morning, she was up lighting the fire with stiff fingers, fighting the biting Wyoming wind that kept trying to kill the flame. Her first biscuits were burned on the outside and raw in the middle. The coffee tasted like smoky water. The cowboys ate without complaining, but their silence felt like judgment, pressing on her shoulders. She wasn't a cook. She wasn't even supposed to be here. She was a seamstress who had traded scissors for cast iron. Every muscle in her body ached. Her hands, soft from years of careful sewing, blistered from scrub brushes and hauling water from the creek. Some nights, she cried herself to sleep, quiet tears soaking into her thin bedroll. But she never cried where anyone could see, and she never quit. The men noticed that. But someone else noticed even more. Ellie. The little girl was 9, thin as a fence rail, with straw-colored braids and big, watchful eyes. She rarely spoke. Her father, one of Caleb's best hands, had died the previous winter. Caleb had taken her in, and she moved around the camp like a ghost, doing chores with a small, serious face. But she watched Mary with a curiosity deeper than fear. One afternoon, a cowboy named Silas ripped his shirt on a nail. He cursed, ready to toss it in the fire. "Let me see it," Mary said softly. The men went silent. From her little leather bag she took out her needle and thread. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence, smooth and steady. The torn sleeve came together in a neat, firm seam. When she handed it back, Silas stared in disbelief. "Stronger than before," he muttered, touching the repair. Mary nodded, brushing dust from her skirt. Ellie watched her hands like they were magic. Later, Caleb saw Mary calming a skittish young horse. Jed had been trying to force the hoof up, swearing loudly, making the animal rear. Mary stepped close, talking softly, her hand gentle on the horse's neck. The wild-eyed creature relaxed under her touch. "She's good with him," one cowboy whispered. "She's good," Caleb said quietly, surprising himself. He didn't know what to make of her. She was tougher than she looked, but fragile in ways he didn't understand. She worked harder than some of the men. She never complained. And Ellie, little Ellie, was slowly drifting toward her like she had found something she had lost long ago. And every time Caleb looked at Mary, he felt something dangerous, something he had buried deep. But danger came faster than he expected. One morning, Jed rode in from town carrying a newspaper. His face looked sick. He held it out to Caleb with shaking hands. "There's something you need to see." Caleb opened the paper. Mary stood nearby, ladling coffee into tin cups. When she heard the paper crack, she glanced over. Her heart dropped. There it was. A notice calling her a fraud, saying she deceived a hard-working man, saying she came to town pretending to be a mail-order bride. No name listed, but everyone would know. The ground felt like it tilted under her feet. The men stopped eating. Mary couldn't breathe. 2 days later, the sheriff came. Sheriff Kincaid rode into the camp slow and smug, dust settling around him like a cloud of poison. He swung off his horse and walked straight toward Mary. "There she is," he said in a voice thick with satisfaction. "Mary Whitlow, or whoever you truly are." Caleb stepped forward, blocking the sheriff's path. Mary blinked, stunned. "She works for me," Caleb said, voice quiet but dangerous. "She's no vagrant." Quote. Kincaid smirked. "Not for long. Mr. Pike wants trouble out of this county. And trouble always starts with a woman who lies." Mary felt her whole world collapsing. The whispers she'd run from had followed her across miles of track. Now they were closing in again. "You got 1 week to get out," Kincaid said. "If I have to come back, it won't be pleasant." He tipped his hat and rode away, leaving behind a silence colder than any winter wind. Mary's stomach twisted in knots. The cowboys avoided her eyes. Their respect had turned to wariness. She was no longer just a cook. She was a mark, a risk, a woman who might bring ruin to the ranch. That night, she lay awake under the open sky, staring at the stars through burning eyes. Everything she had built here, every hard-earned scrap of dignity, was slipping through her fingers. Caleb barely spoke to her the next morning. The distance hurt worse than anything, but trouble didn't wait. Abner Pike's men were moving the survey markers, pushing into Caleb's land, stealing water from the creek. A fight was rising like a storm cloud, and in the middle of it all was Mary, one lie hanging over her like a noose. But fate wasn't finished with her yet. The storm came on a hot afternoon. Not rain, something far worse. Ellie's little pet calf kicked loose from a broken fence. The frightened animal bolted toward the creek bed. Ellie took off after it without thinking. "Ellie, no!" Mary screamed. Then she saw it. Upstream, a dark line moving fast. A flash flood. The dam Pike had built was bursting. Without thinking, without a breath, without fear, Mary ran. She slid down the bank, grabbed Ellie just as the roaring water slammed into them, and was swept away in the churning brown flood. Stones and branches tore at her dress. Cold water stole her breath. Her clothes ripped. Her body felt bruised and battered as she clung to the child with everything she had. When Caleb saw them in the water, something inside him broke. He threw himself from his horse and charged into the flood. He roped Mary with a precision born of raw desperation. He dragged both of them from the water, lifting Ellie into his arms, then turning back to Mary. Her dress was torn to shreds from the force of the water. Mud streaked her skin. She trembled violently from cold and shock. Caleb's hands shook when he draped his coat over her shoulders. Not from desire, from the fear of how close he had come to losing her. The cowboy's hands trembled, but he couldn't look away. Not after what she had done. Not after she saved the one person he loved most. Everything changed in that moment. For Caleb, for the camp, and for Mary. The lie that had destroyed her life was suddenly the smallest part of her story. Because now Caleb knew the truth that mattered. She was worth fighting for. What if the woman everyone tried to push out was the only one strong enough to save them all? The morning after the rescue, the camp carried a new quiet. The men respected Mary now in a way words could not describe. Ellie clung to her like a shadow, her small hand always searching for Mary's. And Caleb, he watched Mary in a different way. Not with suspicion, not with cold distance, but with something deeper, something he tried hard to hide. But Mary's lie still hung in the air, heavy as storm clouds. And Caleb was a man who carried responsibilities like armor. He knew her truth now. He knew she was not Eliza. And the weight of that truth pressed on him harder than before. One evening he asked her to walk with him. They stopped near the creek that had almost taken her life. The sound of running water filled the silence between them. Caleb looked at her with gray eyes steady as stone. "When this drive is over," he said, "I'll pay you what you're owed. I'll buy you a ticket east or west. But you can't stay here." Her chest tightened as if someone had grabbed her heart in their fist. "I understand," she whispered, but understanding didn't stop the quiet ache. She had begun to feel something here. Stability, purpose, belonging. She had begun to feel something for Ellie, and something she was afraid to name for Caleb. The days after were the hardest she had ever lived. The men were polite, but distant. Caleb kept his words short. Ellie watched them both with confused, hurting eyes. And all around them, Abner Pike was tightening his grip on the valley. Pike's men built a dam upstream, stealing water from Caleb's ranch. They cut fences at night. They sabotaged trails and left threats. Pike wasn't just greedy. He wanted the land at any cost. And a woman with a false name made the perfect excuse to bring pressure on Caleb. But Mary wasn't done fighting yet. One night, after another long day of digging a new ditch to redirect what little water they had left, Ellie woke screaming in her sleep. Mary rushed to her, soothing her with soft words, brushing her hair back, staying until the girl slept again. Caleb lay in the dark nearby, listening to Mary's gentle voice. He hadn't heard a lullaby since his wife died, and something inside him shifted. He started watching Mary differently. Not with suspicion, not with judgment, but with quiet longing. 3 days later, everything exploded. A fire started in the eastern pasture, fast, furious, fanned by the wind. A wall of flames devoured the dry grass, racing toward the herd. Caleb shouted orders, the men scattering in frantic lines. Mary didn't hesitate. She soaked cloths, carried water, passed supplies, working with a fierce determination. Sweat mixed with soot on her face, but she never stopped moving. Then Ellie screamed. The fire had jumped the break. Ellie was trapped near the chuck wagon, smoke closing in fast around her. Mary didn't think. She ran straight into the smoke. "Ellie," she cried, coughing, stumbling over burning grass. Caleb saw it from across the field. His heart stopped. He dropped the proof he had against Pike. He dropped his rifle. He turned his back on the sheriff, aiming a gun at him. None of it mattered. He ran. Mary reached Ellie, snatching the terrified girl into her arms. A burning spark landed on her skirt, and the fabric caught fire. She slapped at it, but the flames climbed fast, licking up her leg. Caleb burst through the smoke like a force of nature, scooping Ellie into one arm and grabbing Mary around the waist with the other. He dragged them both through a break in the fire, shielding them with his own body, coughing and gasping as the heat tore at his lungs. When they reached safety, he fell to his knees, pulling Mary close. She was coughing, shaking, her skirts burned and torn. His coat slid off her shoulders, revealing bruised skin and torn seams. His hands trembled as he touched her face, not from fear, from the realization that losing her would have destroyed him. "Mary," he whispered, voice raw, "I'm so sorry. I should never have pushed you away." Her eyes lifted to his, filled with pain and confusion. "I didn't want to bring you trouble," she said softly. "You didn't," he answered. "You brought me back to life." But the fight wasn't over. That same night, Mary found a shattered crate near the burned wagon, stamped with Pike's company mark. She remembered a lightning-shaped carving on a fake survey stake Caleb had thrown aside earlier, a crooked mark. "A signature," she showed Caleb. "This carving is on the fake stakes," she said, "not on the real ones." It was the first real proof they had. They rode to town at dawn. At the courthouse, the old land registrar, Mr. Abernathy, listened to Mary's quiet explanation. Her steady hands laid out the fake stake beside the official map. Her careful eye caught every detail, every lie. For hours, they pieced together the truth, side by side. Then, a stranger arrived, Deputy U.S. Marshal Evans. He had come because of a petition Caleb and other ranchers had sent weeks earlier. Evans listened as Mary explained her discovery. He studied her handmade comparison map. Then he stood tall. "It's enough," he said. "We arrest Pike today. Pike was dragged from the saloon. Sheriff Kincaid lost his badge. Pike's hired arsonist confessed. Justice came down on Willow Bluff hard. When it was over, Caleb and Mary walked out of town together. Ellie ran to them, wrapping her small arms around Mary's leg. Back at the ranch, Caleb led Mary to the creek. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was soft, almost breaking. "When I told you to leave, I wasn't angry at the lie. I was afraid." She looked up at him, tears rising. "I was afraid to care about someone again," he whispered. "Afraid of losing them." He stepped closer. "But I've already lost you once in that water. I'll never survive losing you again." Her breath caught. "Then don't," she whispered. He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was gentle, certain. "Stay," he said. "Not as a cook, not as a worker. Stay as part of this family. Stay as the woman I love." Her tears fell softly. "I'll stay," she whispered. "As long as you'll have me." Ellie's giggle floated through the air. She held out her wooden horse, the one her father had carved, and placed it in Mary's hands, offering her heart without words. Weeks later, they married under the open sky. Simple vows, honest words, a new beginning. The rebuilt pastures turned green again. The ranch grew strong. And every morning, Caleb wrapped his arms around Mary as they watched the sun rise over the fences they fought so hard to save. The woman who came on the wrong ticket. The woman they tried to shame. The woman Caleb once thought he should send away. Now stood at the center of a family, a ranch, a life she had earned with courage, truth, and love.